Hello and welcome back to the vlog. It's November the 18th and I thought I'd do a quick video because it's the coldest day of the heating season so far. When I got up this morning it was -2 at our house. Our heat pump was cruising along nicely, 21-degree room temperature and all's good. The first job I went out to prompted me to make this video because just as I turned up, it was doing a defrost cycle. So I thought I'd give a quick run through of what the defrost cycle is all about, why heat pumps do it, what to expect, and if the defrost is going wrong, the reasons behind it and what you can do to sort it out. So I did film a full defrost cycle on site and it lasted just over 4 minutes. So I'm going to drop that into this vlog so you can see it. I don't know if I'll do the full 4 minutes because it might be a bit boring, so I'll cut it. I'll speed it up at times to get it through, but just so you know, it was just over 4 minutes long, which is pretty typical for a defrost. So what is the defrost cycle all about? Why do we talk about it as heat pump engineers, and what should a homeowner expect? So a heat pump ultimately extracts heat from the ambient air outside and moves it into your house. And in order to do that in colder weather, we have to have the evaporator, which is the finned radiator on the back of your heat pump, colder than the ambient air. So typically when we get below 5 degrees ambient temperature, our evaporator will be heading towards 0 degrees because we've got to have the evaporator cooler than the outdoor air so the heat transfers from the air into the evaporator. Now, there's always a level of moisture in the ambient air, and obviously water freezes at roughly 0 degrees. So when the evaporator is around that temperature and below, any moisture that's in the air freezes to the evaporator. And periodically, the heat pump has to defrost itself to melt that ice. Now, under normal operating conditions, it should almost look like it's got snow on after a period of time. So your evaporator will be white with a light dusting of snow, and that's typical, that's normal, and that's what you'll see in the clip that I'm going to show you shortly. And eventually when that builds up to almost a solid layer of snow, the heat pump will stop, it'll reverse itself, so instead of putting heat into your house, it takes heat from your house, heats the evaporator up and melts the ice, okay? Now this should typically happen as the ambient air outside drops below 5 degrees. It can happen anything up to 4 times an hour, and that will vary. It could be once an hour, twice an hour, 3 times an hour, 4 times an hour, and that depends on the humidity level in the air and the air temperature. Now, just above 0 degrees, so anything between 0 and 5 degrees is the time that you have the most frequent defrosts. When we get lower than 0 degrees, because the ambient air is typically drier or less humid, defrosts can stretch out and be less frequent. So as long as your heat pump is operating normally, it'll defrost anything up to the 4 times an hour, and it should be able to clear that ice within 4 minutes. So I'll tell you what we'll do, we'll drop in the video now of the defrost cycle. I am narrating over it, so you can, I'm literally telling you what's happening. And like I say, I will speed it up a bit so we get through it quicker, and then I'll join you after the video to summarise what you've seen. What will happen first is the fan will stop. The reversing valve has already slipped across, and you'll notice already the copper tubes there are starting to defrost. Slowly, the gold of the evaporator will appear. And the compressor will slowly ramp up to melt all the ice. So the compressor is still running at the minute. You'll be able to hear the compressor just if I come round here. This is totally normal operation for a heat pump. It'll ice up like this, almost look like it's got snow on it. And then over the course of 2 to 5 minutes, it'll defrost itself. Generally, these defrosts occur anything up to 3 times an hour, 4 times an hour when it's cold and humid. currently 2 minutes 38 seconds into the defrost. Really getting it shifted. So currently we're pulling heat from the house to do this defrost cycle. So having that correct system volume is important. Go. So what will happen now is the fan will fire up, steam comes off, back in heating mode, done. 4 minutes and 4 seconds, and all that ice is gone. Super. So as you saw there in the video, that is a typical defrost cycle. That is what you should experience as a homeowner, and it shouldn't affect your heating performance at all. If you've got correct system volume, the heat pump's sized adequately, and it's a good quality heat pump, that defrost cycle of 4 minutes shouldn't affect your comfort in the house. So because you've got enough system volume, that means there's enough energy there for the heat pump to utilise, complete the defrost cycle and start heating again without your room temperature dropping. If you've not got adequate system volume or an undersized heat pump, that's when the death spiral can start. And what we mean by the death spiral is there's not enough energy there for the heat pump to use to do its defrost cycle, and then upon completing the defrost cycle, the heat pump isn't big enough to produce enough heat to catch up with your room temperature, and it gradually rocks back and forth into a defrost cycle, back heating again, and you never actually achieve room temperature. So that's one thing that could go wrong. If your defrost cycle isn't happening quickly enough, so your evaporator doesn't look like it's got snow on it, almost looks like it's got shiny ice on it, that could be a sensor issue with the heat pump. If it's an older heat pump, it might have a defrost timer on. And basically the old method of defrosting, the heat pump would just defrost at a set time no matter what, regardless. When you get below an ambient temperature, it'll just decide, I'm going to defrost every 15 minutes regardless of whether I need to now. Modern heat pumps have sensors on that can sense the evaporation temperature, so it knows how much energy is being taken out in between the refrigerant going into the evaporator and coming out of the evaporator. So it can tell how much ice is built up just by the sensors, so it'll only defrost if it needs to. Now, if one of those sensors starts reading out, that can cause a defrost issue. If a reversing valve gets stuck, that can cause a defrost issue. But typically, you'll either have a design issue, so an undersized heat pump or undersized system volume that will cause defrost issues, or an actual failure in the heat pump itself, be it a sensor, reversing valve, or other fault. So I hope that helps explain the defrost cycle a bit more clearly. It's nothing to worry about. As long as the system's designed correctly, it will not affect your life at all. Just expect that steam, expect it to go into the defrost cycle, and you should only really contact your installer if performance drops. So if you're not warm enough, if your hot water's not warm enough, or the heat pump gets stuck, frozen solid, so it's got that shiny ice on, then you should contact your installer. But typically, doing a defrost cycle is normal. And as I say, in these conditions, it can be anything up to 4 times an hour. Now, if any of you got any questions, just fire them in the comments below and I will try and get back to you and answer them. And yeah, if you can like and subscribe and give us a share, I'd really appreciate it. Cheers.